If I had known that one cup of coffee could burn away 68 years of quiet dignity, I would have stayed in bed that morning. The sun had just slipped through the lace curtains of my daughter's kitchen, scattering soft gold across the marble counter. Clara hummed by the stove, her voice sugar-sweet, the way she always sounded before asking for something. I sat at the breakfast table, holding a mug that said, "World's Best Mom," a gift from her when she still meant it. Her son, my grandson, Ethan, was scrolling through his phone, cereal bowl untouched. "Grandma," he said without looking up, "can I borrow your credit card again? It's for my gaming rig. Only $5,000. $5,000. He said it like asking for salt. I didn't even flinch. "No, Ethan, you'll have to wait until you earn it." That single word "no" was the match that lit the fire. Clara froze mid-pour, coffee pot trembling just slightly. The silence stretched, thick and humming like the seconds before a storm. Then, with an eerie calm, she walked toward me. She didn't slap me. No, she did something worse. She tilted the coffee pot and poured. The scalding liquid splashed across my lap, seeping through thin cotton, burning my skin and my pride in one cruel motion. I gasped, leapt up the mug shattered on the floor. Clara's expression didn't change. "If you're going to be selfish, Mom, maybe it's time you leave. Either give Ethan what he needs, or find somewhere else to stay. We're not running a charity here." A charity. That word hit harder than the burn. I stood there dripping, trembling, coffee pooling around my feet. Ethan didn't even look up. My own daughter crossed her arms like a CEO delivering termination news. "I've paid the utilities, the groceries," I said softly, my voice barely holding. "I've never asked you for a thing." She rolled her eyes. "You're lucky I let you stay here at all. After your surgery, you couldn't even walk. I managed everything for you, Mom. I kept your life running." No, she hadn't kept it running. She'd taken the wheel, driven it somewhere I didn't recognize, and called it love. I wanted to scream not from the pain, but from the betrayal. But I didn't, because I finally understood. This wasn't my daughter anymore. This was a woman who measured affection in dollars. Behind her, Ethan muttered, "So, can I use it or not?" That was when something inside me broke, not my patience, not my heart, but the illusion that I still had a home here. I reached for a towel, dabbing the burn. No one moved to help me. Clara's silence was triumph. Ethan's indifference was applause. I looked at the broken mug, the one that once said "World's Best Mom." The letters were smeared, melted by heat. "I'll be gone before sunset," I said quietly. For a split second, Clara blinked, caught off guard. She expected pleading, not peace. What she didn't know was that quiet doesn't mean weak. Quiet can be the sound of a fuse burning toward freedom. And if you've ever been pushed out of your own family, if you've ever been told that your love wasn't worth enough, stay. Listen, because this story is for you. And if it moves you even a little, give it a like, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs to remember. Silence is not surrender. The door clicked shut behind me as I walked to my room. My legs still stung, but the ache in my chest was sharper. It wasn't just pain, it was awakening. That day, I realized something that should terrify anyone who has ever trusted too easily. Cruelty doesn't always shout. Sometimes it pours you coffee and calls it kindness. I sat on the edge of the bed, the one I'd slept in since the surgery Clara swore she'd help me recover from. I had mistaken her management for care, her control for love. But now, the illusion was gone. I stood up slowly, my hip aching as I reached for the old suitcase on the top shelf. Dust fell in small clouds, dancing in the morning light. I packed quietly, not with fear but with precision. Each folded blouse, each pair of socks, each photograph tucked away was a declaration. I may be leaving with little, but I'm taking everything that's mine. Through the wall, I heard the low hum of the television. Clara was back to her favorite renovation. Show the kind about perfect homes built on lies. How fitting. Ethan's laughter drifted from his room. Not once did anyone knock. I opened the drawer and pulled out an envelope hidden beneath the linens. My birth certificate, insurance papers, and a printed routing number. I didn't know why I'd kept them safe until now. Maybe some part of me had always known this day would come. When I glanced at the mirror, I saw someone I hadn't seen in years, a woman with fire behind her wrinkles. I reached for my purse. It felt too light. I opened it. No wallet, no ID, no bank card. My breath caught. I tore through every pocket. Nothing. She'd taken it. Months ago, when I was too tired to stand at the bank, Clara had smiled and said, "Let me handle your bills, Mom. It's easier this way." And I had let her. I had let her take my name, my money, my autonomy one helpful step at a time. I sat down, the burn on my leg throbbing in rhythm with my pulse, shame and fury tangled inside me. How had I, a woman who had once handled emergencies, delivered babies, comforted the dying, become this quiet ghost in her own life? But I didn't cry. Not anymore. Instead, I reached for my phone. My fingers shook, but my voice didn't when I pressed Gerald Pierce. He picked up on the second ring. "Eleanor?" he said, voice soft, steady, familiar. "No," I whispered. "But it will be." That's how the first chapter of freedom begins, not with revenge, but with the decision to stop asking for permission to exist. The suitcase made a dull thump when it hit the floor. For a second, I just stood there, staring at it, realizing how something so ordinary could suddenly mean freedom. I'd bought that suitcase 40 years ago, when Cliff and I still took road trips down the Oregon coast. Back then, it smelled like new leather and sunscreen. Now it smelled faintly of dust and disinfectant. A relic, like me. I folded each blouse with care, slipping my jewelry pouch into the side pocket, a small collection of costume beads, and one pearl ring Cliff gave me on our 25th anniversary. I had no idea where I was going, but I knew exactly where I couldn't stay. From the kitchen came the clatter of dishes, Clara talking on her phone in that clipped tone she used for everyone but me. "I told her she can't just freeload forever," she said. A pause, then laughter. "Oh, don't worry. Mom's too proud to admit she's broke." I paused mid-fold, my fingers stiffening around the edge of a sweater. Proud. That was the label she'd given me, as if self-respect were an inconvenience. The mug burn on my leg pulsed with heat. I looked down and saw a faint red mark seeping through my pajamas, a perfect little reminder of how much her care cost me. I went to the dresser for my purse, still too light. I checked again. No wallet, no ID, no bank card. My stomach dropped like a stone. I opened every drawer, flipped through the pockets of my coat, the bedside table. Nothing. That's when the memory came a few weeks ago at the pharmacy, Clara insisting, "Let me carry your bag, Mom, so you don't drop it." I thought she was helping. She was hunting. I sank onto the bed, the air thick and sour around me. My heart wasn't breaking. It was remembering. Remembering every helpful suggestion she'd made over the past year. "I'll set your utilities to auto-pay. I'll move your pension deposits to my account. It's easier that way. I'll keep your checkbook so you don't lose it." Step by step, she'd folded my independence into her pocket, smiling all the while. And I had thanked her. The nausea came not from betrayal, but from recognition that I'd handed over every key myself. I needed to think, to breathe. I reached for my phone and scrolled down until I found his name. Gerald Pierce, retired attorney, my old neighbor, the kind of man who fixed leaky faucets and quoted Hemingway. He answered on the second ring. "Eleanor?" "No," I said, my voice steady despite the tears clawing at my throat. "But I think I'm finally going to be." There was a pause, soft and heavy. Then, "Where are you?" "Still here. For now. Pack. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When I hung up, the silence pressed in, not peaceful, not empty, but listening. I realized the house itself had been Clara's accomplice all along. The walls held every insult, every sigh, every manipulation whispered as concern. I zipped the suitcase shut, the sound loud enough to echo down the hall. From the living room, the TV blared some renovation show about dream homes. How ironic. Clara didn't knock. Ethan didn't ask if I was okay. I didn't expect them to. Instead, I stood before the mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't small or fragile. She looked tired, yes. But there was something new in her eyes, something alive. "Quiet doesn't mean weak," I whispered. Then came the knock at the door. Not Clara's. A gentle rhythm, 3 taps, and a pause. Gerald. He didn't look surprised when I opened the door. He just took the suitcase from my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Ready?" he asked. "I think so." We walked past Clara's car in the driveway. She didn't look up from her phone. Ethan was laughing at his screen. Neither of them noticed the woman walking away. Good. Let them miss the silence later. The drive out of the neighborhood was wordless. Gerald's old sedan hummed, the world outside turning from neat lawns to open sky. I watched the rows of identical houses pass by, the kind of homes built to hide dysfunction behind good paint. After a while, he spoke. "You remember when you used to beat everyone at trivia night?" I laughed softly. "Barely. Why?" "You always knew the answers before anyone else. Just forgot how to raise your hand." I turned toward him, startled by how much truth hid in that simple sentence. "I let her take everything, Gerald." He shook his head. "No, you trusted. There's a difference. One's human, the other's criminal." Outside, the rain began soft, hesitant, like the sky was testing forgiveness. "Where are we going?" I asked. "There's a place I want you to see," he said. "Willow Haven, small senior community by the lake. They've got ducks, a library, and more gossip than a courthouse." I smiled despite myself. "Sounds too good for me." He glanced at me briefly, his eyes kind. "No, Eleanor, it sounds right for you." As we drove, the weight began to shift, not off my shoulders, but into something balanced. The ache was still there, but it was mine now. For the first time in years, I felt the faint pulse of my own will returning. Maybe this was what healing looked like, not loud or triumphant, but quiet and deliberate, like water carving stone. By the time we reached the long, tree-lined road that led to Willow Haven, the rain had stopped. Ahead, sunlight cut through the mist, turning the wet asphalt into a silver ribbon. Gerald turned to me, smiling faintly. "This is where the next chapter begins." And for once, I believed him. The gates of Willow Haven were made of old oak, carved with ivy patterns that time had softened into elegance. As Gerald's car rolled through, I felt something tighten in my chest, a mix of disbelief and fragile hope. I'd imagined nursing homes before. Sterile walls, faint bleach smell, silence thick as guilt. But this wasn't that. The moment we stepped out, the air smelled like jasmine and rain-soaked cedar. The courtyard stretched wide, dotted with hydrangeas in full bloom. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime sang. Inside, the lobby felt more like a country inn than a senior residence. Pale sunlight filtered through skylights onto polished wood floors. A receptionist in a soft blue cardigan greeted us with a smile, not the fake kind that hides pity, but the warm, unhurried kind of someone who has time to look you in the eyes. "You must be Mrs. Whitmore," she said. "Welcome to Willow Haven," Gerald called ahead. "Just Eleanor, please," I said, instinctively correcting her. Titles felt too heavy now, like they belonged to a different woman. She handed me a small clipboard. "No rush, dear. Take your time." "Would you like to see the gardens first?" Before I could answer, Gerald chuckled. "Trust me, she's the type to find her spot before she signs anything." I smiled faintly. He wasn't wrong. We followed a cobblestone path past a koi pond, where two women sat laughing over tea, their walkers parked side by side. The sound startled me. It wasn't forced laughter, not polite or bitter. It was free. For a long time, I'd forgotten what that sounded like. Gerald walked beside me, silent but present. His presence was a kind of anchor, not saving, just steady. When we reached the edge of the pond, I stopped. The water mirrored the sky perfectly, each ripple scattering the reflection like pieces of a broken lie. "It's peaceful," I said quietly. "Peaceful's earned," Gerald replied. "You've done the work, you just haven't noticed." I wanted to believe him. But the voice in my head, the one that still sounded like Clara, kept whispering, "You can't make it alone. You'll need me again." I shook it off. The truth was, I had been surviving Clara's version of love for too long. Love with terms and receipts. Love that tallied worth in utility bills and gratitude quotas. Here, surrounded by strangers who smiled without agenda, I felt something stretch in my chest like air entering a long-abandoned room. By the time we returned to the office, the receptionist, her name tag, said Lydia had already set out a tray of tea and lemon cookies. She poured me a cup and asked gently, "Would you like to see a studio?" Just for a look. The word studio made my heart stumble. I hadn't had a space of my own since Cliff died. Everything since had been borrowed rooms in other people's homes, other people's control. "Yes," I said finally. She led us down a hallway filled with framed watercolor paintings of lakes and fields. Every door we passed had a small flower decal and a name: Mr. S. Hargrove, Room 12, Anita, Room 14. It didn't feel like an institution. It felt like a neighborhood with softer edges. When she opened the door to the studio, I stopped cold. It was small but bright white walls, light wood floor, a tiny kitchenette, and a balcony overlooking the koi pond. There was even a reading chair by the window. "This one's available," Lydia said softly. "Month to month. No pressure." Clara's voice echoed again in my head. "Those places are for rich retirees, not people like you, Mom." I almost laughed. Clara was wrong about a lot of things, but mostly she was wrong about who I was without her. "How much is it?" I asked. Lydia told me the number. My stomach twisted. It wasn't cheap, but it wasn't impossible. Gerald caught my hesitation. "You have more control than you think," he said. "But before we talk rent, we'll talk protection." "Protection?" He nodded. "Financial, legal, emotional, the trifecta." That word protection felt heavier than I expected. It wasn't pity. It was promise. Later, in Gerald's small home office, we spread my papers across the table like a map of everything I'd lost. He examined my bank statements, shaking his head at the withdrawals. "Recurring charges from stores you don't shop at. Subscriptions you've never used. Your daughter's fingerprints are all over this." I felt myself flush with both shame and rage. She said she was simplifying things after my surgery. I thought she was just being efficient. "She was being strategic," he said quietly. "This is called financial grooming. Happens to more people than you'd believe." He paused, looking at me over his glasses. "You ready to start fighting back?" I nodded. The word barely a whisper. "Yes." "Good. Because tomorrow, we file for a financial protection order. I'll help you set up a separate account, your name, your control. Then we start reclaiming the rest." For the first time since that scalding morning, I felt something fierce stir in me. Not anger, not revenge. Justice. I thought of Clara's smirk, of Ethan's entitled voice, of how easily they had mistaken my silence for surrender. They didn't know me at all. That night, I stayed in a guest suite at Willow Haven. The bed was soft, the sheets smelled like lavender. For the first time in years, I fell asleep without fear of a door opening in the dark. Outside, the koi pond shimmered under the moonlight. Freedom had a sound that night, a quiet drip of rain on glass, and the whisper of a woman remembering who she was. Morning sunlight spilled across the curtains like melted honey, the kind that only exists in places built for healing. For the first time in years, I woke up without the heavy ache of obligation. No sound of Clara's heels clacking against hardwood. No lectures disguised as reminders. Just quiet. I sat up slowly, testing my hip. Still stiff, but steady. Progress. The pain was manageable now, more memory than punishment. I made myself a cup of tea with the little kettle on the counter and stood by the balcony. The pond below rippled gently, reflecting a small world that was entirely mine. For the first time in years, I didn't have to ask permission to watch the sunrise. Gerald arrived just before noon, punctual as always, a stack of files under his arm and determination written across his weathered face. "Morning sunshine," he said with a half-smile. "Ready to reclaim your life?" I smiled faintly. "I already started last night. I didn't dream about them." "That's a good start," he said, setting the folder down. "Today, we'll make it official." Inside the folder was a printout of every transaction Clara had made in my name, withdrawals, transfers, auto payments for things I never approved. Each line felt like a small betrayal wearing an invoice. "She was good," Gerald said, tapping one of the statements. "Not good enough to erase her trail, but careful enough to think you'd never check." I ran my finger down the column of numbers, my chest tightening. She must have thought I'd never look. "She counted on it," he said. "They always do." He passed me another form, a petition for elder financial protection and account reclamation. The title alone made my hands tremble. I wasn't used to words that powerful belonging to me. "Sign here," he said gently. I hesitated, pen hovering. "Do you think this will stop her?" He exhaled slowly. "It'll start the process. It'll also send a message she can't hide behind your kindness anymore." So I signed. My hand shook, but my signature looked steady, deliberate. For once, I wasn't signing something she had filled out for me. I was writing my name into a new story. When the paperwork was done, Gerald leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. Now for the next step, the house. I blinked. "What about it?" He reached for another folder. "Remember when Clara said she had the deed transferred to help with your medical paperwork?" "Yes," I said slowly, dread crawling up my spine. "Well," he said, flipping the page around for me to see, "she only changed the mailing address. The legal ownership still yours. I stared at the document. Eleanor Whitmore, printed neatly beside the title line. My breath caught. She never actually took the house? Gerald smiled, that quiet, knowing smile lawyers save for rare victories. She thought she did. She never filed the full transfer. Probably didn't want you to notice, which means it's yours to protect. I pressed a hand to my chest. Gerald, that house is still your home, he finished, and we're going to secure it before she even realizes it. He explained how we'd create a living trust in my name, an irrevocable one, which meant no one, not even Clara, could access it without my written permission. He'd already spoken with a notary. The documents were ready. I stared at the page, realizing what it meant. Every manipulation, every condescending word about how lucky I was to stay there was built on a lie. She didn't own the house. She owned my fear. Not anymore. Later that afternoon, I walked the garden paths of Willowhaven, the folder pressed to my chest like a secret weapon. The koi glided under the water's surface, flashes of orange and white in perfect silence. I watched them for a long time. They moved without panic, without rush. Gerald found me there and joined me on the bench. He didn't speak at first. He never did, until he knew I was ready. You look different, he said finally. I feel different, I answered, like I've been holding my breath for years and didn't even realize it. He nodded toward the water. That's what taking your life back feels like. Quiet, solid. I exhaled. Do you think she'll notice? Oh, she'll notice, he said with a small grin, but by the time she does, it'll be too late. When the sun dipped below the trees, I went back inside and sat at the little writing desk by the window. I opened my old notebook, the one I used to jot down grocery lists and recipes in. But tonight, it became something else, a record. I wrote down everything I could remember every time Clara used my card, every suspicious purchase, every lie told sweetly. My handwriting trembled, but my resolve didn't. When I was done, I flipped to the first page and wrote a title across the top in bold, uneven strokes. The Cost of Love. It wasn't just a record. It was evidence, the kind that could burn illusions to ash. As I closed the notebook, a strange calm washed over me. I wasn't done. I was just beginning. For years, I'd let Clara narrate my story, her version of the frail mother who couldn't survive without her. But tonight, I held the pen. And this time, every word would be mine. The next morning, I was up before sunrise. The world outside was still pale and blue, the air thick with dew and early birdsong. I stood on the balcony, watching the koi stir beneath the water's skin. Their movement was slow, deliberate, patient, everything I wanted to be. By 8, Gerald was back, punctual as ever. He held a thermos in one hand and a manila envelope in the other. Coffee? He asked, smirking. Not the burning kind. I laughed. A short sound, but real. Black, please. I've had enough cream and sugar lies to last a lifetime. He handed me a cup and placed the envelope on the table. Today's the day we make it official. Inside were the trust documents, pages upon pages of fine print that would place my house, savings, and remaining assets under my full legal control. Gerald had arranged everything. Witnesses, notary, verification. All I had to do was sign. It felt surreal. Paperwork had always been Clara's domain. I'd spent years letting her fill the blanks, trusting her to handle the details. Now, for the first time, my name meant something again. The notary, a calm woman named Miriam, met us in the Willowhaven tea room. She was efficient but kind, explaining each line before I signed. My pen hovered once or twice, but Gerald's reassuring nods anchored me. When the final signature was done, Miriam gathered the papers neatly. Congratulations, Mrs. Whitmore. Your assets are now fully protected under the Whitmore Irrevocable Trust. No one can access or alter it without your written consent. Her words landed like a prayer. I exhaled. For the first time in months, my lungs didn't ache from holding in fear. After Miriam left, Gerald poured us both more coffee. Now, he said, let's talk about what comes next. He opened another file and laid out several photographs, familiar ones. My house, my garden. The magnolia tree Cliff planted for our anniversary. I've scheduled a property reassessment, he explained. It's part of the process to reestablish your ownership records. A realtor will visit tomorrow. My chest tightened. A realtor? At my house? He nodded. It's necessary. It's not about selling yet, it's about ensuring the property is properly valued under your name. Once it's recorded, Clara won't be able to use it for credit or loans. The thought of her face when she realized made something flicker inside me. Satisfaction, maybe, not cruelty, just justice. Still, a part of me hesitated. She'll be furious. She'll be exposed, he corrected, and anger is just a mask for panic. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the writing desk, the lamp throwing a small circle of gold onto the page. I wrote to Cliff not to send, but to say what had been trapped in my throat for years. You were right. Love shouldn't feel like control. I thought I was being cared for, but I was being managed. I thought staying quiet was keeping peace, but it was just feeding her power. I don't want revenge. I just want my name back. I placed the letter in the drawer beside my notebook. Maybe one day I'd burn it. Maybe I'd keep it forever. The next afternoon, Gerald stopped by again, this time wearing his old navy windbreaker. He held a small white envelope. The reassessment's done, he said. The realtor was professional. Clara was, less so. I froze. She saw? He nodded. She came home mid-inspection. I wasn't there, but the realtor said she demanded to know why someone was evaluating her house. A bitter laugh escaped me. Her house. Gerald handed me the envelope. Inside was a single sheet, the new valuation, officially under my name, stamped and notarized. It was done. Legally, publicly, permanently mine. I looked up, my throat tight. She'll come after me now. He met my gaze calmly. Then let her. Just remember she's running on panic. You're running on proof. That evening, my phone buzzed. The caller ID glowed like a warning flare. Clara. I didn't answer the first 3 times. On the 4th, I picked up. What did you do? She spat, her voice sharp and breathless. There's a stranger in my house taking pictures. You can't just... It's my house, I said softly, evenly. Silence. Then, a hiss. You're unbelievable. You're being manipulated by that old man. You don't even understand what you're doing. Oh, I do, I said, for the first time in years. She exhaled, harsh and quick. You're being cruel. I closed my eyes, feeling no guilt. You told me to leave, Clara. I just followed orders. And before she could twist the silence into a weapon, I hung up. The sound of the disconnect was small, but it was the loudest act of self-respect I'd ever made. Later, I sat by the koi pond again, the evening wind brushing my hair. For once, the reflection staring back at me didn't look like a victim. It looked like someone reclaiming her edges. Freedom didn't roar that night, it whispered. You only miss me now that I said no. I smiled faintly, repeating it under my breath. The world was quiet, but I wasn't invisible anymore. 2 mornings later, the storm arrived not from the sky, but through my phone. Clara's name lit the screen again and again until I turned the ringer off. The air in the tea room trembled with that kind of dread. Only a parent knows the fear that even peace can be stolen back. I ignored her. Instead, I focused on the papers Gerald had given me, new bank forms, a set of clean checks, a debit card still sealed in its envelope. My name printed clearly across the top. Eleanor Whitmore. Not joint account, not authorized user, just me. That single piece of plastic felt heavier than gold. By noon, Gerald called. She knows, he said. I didn't ask how. I could imagine it easily. Her pacing, the flush creeping up her neck, the fury of losing control she'd mistaken for love. She called the bank? I asked. 3 times, he replied. Tried to get details using your birth date. They flagged it immediately. Your accounts are safe. I exhaled, leaning against the window. She won't stop. No, he agreed. But now, every move she makes becomes evidence. That afternoon, I walked the halls of Willow Haven, trying to settle the tremor inside me. On a bulletin board by the dining hall, someone had pinned a hand-painted sign that read, "We bloom again when no one's pruning us." It made me stop. The words felt like truth wearing flowers. I hadn't realized how long I'd been trimmed down to fit someone else's expectations. Clara had pruned me with guilt, fear, and the illusion of safety until there was barely anything left to grow. Now, in this quiet place that smelled of lemon balm and old books, I could finally breathe. When I returned to my room, a soft knock came at the door. Lydia, the receptionist, peeked in. "Mrs. Whitmore, there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent." My stomach dropped. Who? Lydia hesitated. She said her name's Clara. For a moment, the room tilted. The ghosts of every argument, every accusation, came rushing back. Tell her I'm not available, I said quietly. Lydia nodded, her eyes kind. We can handle it. From my window, I watched as Clara stood in the courtyard below, arms crossed, jaw tight, scanning the building as if she owned it. When the staff approached her, she gestured wildly, her voice rising. The koi startled, scattering beneath the water. I stayed behind the curtain, unseen. Not out of fear. Out of choice. Later, Gerald arrived with a bag of groceries and his usual calm energy. She tried to file a complaint, he said, shaking his head. Claimed we were taking advantage of you, the authorities called. I sent them the trust paperwork and the bank logs. They closed it in 5 minutes. Of course she did, I murmured. Control wears 100 masks. He nodded. You've done the hardest part, Eleanor. You didn't fight her, you just stepped out of reach. I looked out at the garden. The light had shifted, falling gold across the pond. It still hurts, I said, knowing she's my daughter. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, being related by blood doesn't mean she gets to bleed you dry. That made me laugh, sharp and short. That's grim. It's true, he said softly. That night, I sat in bed with my journal, the one labeled The Cost of Love. I wrote, she came today, angry, desperate. She wanted the same thing she's always wanted: access, not to my money, to my obedience. But I've changed the locks inside me. There's no key for that anymore. When I finished, I turned off the lamp and let the darkness settle. Outside, the fountain murmured. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird sang. I thought about what Gerald said earlier about not fighting back, just walking away. For so long, I'd thought survival meant staying. But maybe survival, real survival, was knowing when to leave before the fire reached your skin. I wasn't afraid of her fury anymore. I'd seen the truth beneath it. Anger was just panic wearing perfume. And I, at last, was out of reach. The following days unfolded like quiet pages, gentle mornings, peaceful routines, the first taste of a life without fear. Each sunrise at Willow Haven felt like a small victory, proof that calm could exist without permission. I'd begun to join the other residents for breakfast in the sunroom. Most were cheerful in the way people get after surviving something: illness, loss, betrayal, time itself. We traded small jokes about the coffee being too strong, and every time someone laughed, I felt another layer of my old self returning. Freedom, I was learning, wasn't loud. It was consistency, the small joy of deciding what time to wake, which dress to wear, when to breathe. Around midweek, Gerald stopped by with a new folder. He placed it on the table with that deliberate care of someone handling something important. You've been busy, I said, noting the stack. So have they, he replied grimly, tapping the top sheet. The financial protection officer sent me these. They found multiple attempts from Clara's IP address trying to access your online accounts after they were frozen. I stared at the page. She still hasn't stopped. She's desperate, he said. But now it's not your burden, it's evidence. Evidence, I repeated softly. The word had changed meaning. It used to sound like blame. Now it sounded like truth. Gerald leaned back, studying me. You're handling this better than most people I've worked with. I smiled faintly. I've handled cardiac arrests, Gerald. Paperwork doesn't scare me anymore. After he left, I sat by the window, flipping through the folder. Each page showed a failed attempt, each timestamp a small victory. For years, I'd lived in a house where I couldn't even open my own mail. Now, I had logs, proof that I wasn't crazy, that manipulation wasn't kindness. Clara had built her power on isolation and confusion. Take those away, and her empire crumbled. But freedom has its price. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd raised a child who saw my vulnerability as a resource. The guilt crept in like fog, thick, shapeless, persistent. I whispered into the dark. Was I too soft, or did she just never learn love without control? No answer came, just the soft hum of the pond filter below. The next morning, as I walked the garden paths, I saw 2 women chatting on a bench, one reading aloud from a small leather notebook. They were laughing so freely it startled me. I slowed, then sat nearby, pretending to watch the koi. The reader noticed. You're new, she said warmly. I'm Marjorie, And this chatterbox is Beatrice. Eleanor, I replied. I just moved in. Well, welcome to the club of women who outlived their chaos, Marjorie said, eyes sparkling. Careful though, it's addictive. Beatrice laughed. What she means is, once you get a taste of peace, you'll wonder why you ever begged for love that hurt. Their words landed somewhere deep. I didn't join their laughter right away, but I smiled, the real kind that starts in your chest. For the first time, I realized how many of us existed, women who had handed over our autonomy wrapped in the ribbon of family duty, only to wake up one day and find the ribbon tied into a noose. And yet, here we were, breathing, healing, laughing again. Later that afternoon, Gerald returned with news. The financial abuse unit's moving forward, he said. They're reviewing all the transactions from the last 6 months. I took a slow breath. So this becomes official? Very. And it'll be her first warning shot. After that, the law steps in. I nodded. I'm not sure how I should feel. Proud, he said simply. You're not just surviving this, Eleanor. You're changing how it ends. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and the notary called? The property transfer is complete. The trust is sealed. He blinked. Meaning? Meaning the house is legally yours again. Permanently. It took a second for the words to land. My name, once erased from every piece of paper, now reappeared on something solid. I hadn't realized until that moment how much weight I'd carried just from not belonging anywhere. That house had been turned into a weapon, but it was mine, always had been. Now, it was no longer a reminder of what I'd lost, but a record of what I'd reclaimed. That evening, I sat with Marjorie and Beatrice by the pond, the three of us watching the sky turn apricot and violet. The koi surfaced now and then, scales glinting like tiny fragments of sunrise. Marjorie passed me a cookie and grinned. You look lighter today. Maybe I am, I said. I just signed my life back to myself. Beatrice clapped her hands. Cheers to that. We should throw a party for every woman who learns to say no without apology. I laughed, really laughed this time. The sound felt unfamiliar but right. When I returned to my room, I pulled out my journal and wrote, The law is catching up. The papers are mine. The silence doesn't feel heavy anymore, it feels earned. Then, almost without thinking, I added another line beneath it. They always thought I wouldn't fight back. They forgot I taught myself to endure pain for a living. I closed the journal and turned off the lamp. Outside, the night breeze carried the faint scent of rain. It didn't feel like a warning this time. It felt like renewal. The knock came just after dawn, a steady rhythm, firm but polite. I had a feeling I already knew who it was. I wrapped my robe tighter and opened the door. Gerald stood there, hair wind-tousled, eyes serious, a folder tucked beneath his arm. Morning, he said, though his tone carried none of it. We've got a situation. My pulse quickened. What happened? He sighed. Clara tried to access one of the frozen accounts again. This time, she got creative, emailed the bank pretending to be you. Claimed you were mentally unfit and that she was your caretaker. She even attached a falsified letter. I froze. She what? Gerald nodded grimly. They verified with the trust officer before anything went through. It's already flagged as fraud. But it's getting darker now, Eleanor. She's not just stealing. She's trying to erase you. The words struck like cold steel. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Will she face consequences for this? I asked quietly. Oh, she will, Gerald said. But the law moves slower than conscience. We'll need to be patient. He placed the folder on the small table near the window. Inside were copies of the forged documents. My name was typed across the top, misspelled slightly, but still mine. It felt obscene. I traced the letters with a shaking finger. She didn't even spell it right. I whispered. That's her problem, not yours, he said gently. She's sloppy now. Desperation makes people careless. I sank into the chair, staring out the window. The garden outside shimmered in morning light, too beautiful to fit the ugliness inside me. She's my daughter, Gerald, I said finally. The baby I held through fevers. The teenager who cried when her first love left. How do you hold both truths, that she's part of you, and she's the one undoing you? He didn't answer right away. He just sat down across from me, patient as always. You don't hold both, Eleanor. You let one go. The part that's killing you. Later that morning, I took a walk by the pond. Marjorie joined me halfway through, waving her wide-brimmed hat. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, settling beside me. "Not a ghost," I said softly. "A forgery." Her brows knit together. "She tried something again, didn't she?" I nodded. "She's getting desperate." Marjorie was silent for a long while. Then she said something that stayed with me. "You know, I once thought my son would steal my house too. He didn't. He stole something worse, my belief that he loved me unconditionally. But the truth is, kids like that never stop to love. They calculate. And when you stop feeding the equation, they panic." I turned to her. "Did you ever forgive him?" She smiled sadly. "I forgave myself for not seeing it sooner. That's enough." That night, I found myself sitting at my small writing desk again. I pulled out a clean sheet of paper and began to write, not a letter this time, but a statement. A record. The story as it really was. "My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I am of sound mind and memory. I was not coerced, confused, or manipulated into transferring assets. I was deceived, but now I am aware. Everything that follows is truth. I wrote for hours, dates, times, names, details. Every withdrawal, every comment, every helpful interference. When I finished, I stapled it to my prior notes from Gerald. It was more than evidence now. It was testimony. I had spent decades saving others' patience, family, anyone who needed me. Now I was finally saving myself. 2 days later, the official call came from the Financial Protection Unit. A woman named Officer Daniels introduced herself on speakerphone. "Mrs. Whitmore, your daughter's actions meet the criteria for elder financial exploitation and identity forgery. We're opening a formal investigation. We'll be contacting her within 72 hours. My throat tightened. "What happens next?" "We proceed carefully. She'll be questioned, and the bank accounts remain frozen. You'll be protected legally and financially. No action required on your part for now." I sat there, gripping the receiver like a lifeline. For so long, I had wanted an apology, but this was better. It wasn't closure built on guilt. It was accountability built on truth. When the call ended, Gerald poured us both a glass of water. "Well," he said softly, "it's official." I nodded. "I didn't want it to come to this." "I know," he said, "but sometimes justice isn't revenge, it's clarity." That evening, I went outside. The sky was the color of tarnished silver, heavy with the smell of rain. I stood by the koi pond, watching the first drops ripple across the surface. Clara's face flashed in my mind, not the woman who hurt me, but the little girl she used to be, the one who used to hold my hand at the grocery store and whisper, "Don't let go." I whispered back into the wind, "I didn't, Clara. You did." And for the first time since leaving that house, I felt peace that didn't require forgiveness. Later, in my journal, I wrote, "There's a difference between letting go and giving up." I didn't give up on her. I gave up being her victim. Maybe that's what real love looks like when it finally grows up. Outside, thunder rumbled softly, distant but comforting. This time, the storm didn't scare me. It sounded like applause. By the next morning, the rain had cleared, leaving the world scrubbed clean. The koi pond glistened like liquid glass, and for the first time in years, I felt the same bare, but shining underneath the wreckage. I spent breakfast with Marjorie and Beatrice. They were talking about the upcoming craft fair Willow Haven hosted every spring, debating whether crochet or watercolor would win the resident favorite. I listened quietly, smiling at their banter. The conversation was light, ordinary, alive. The kind of moment that used to slip past me because I was too busy surviving. When Gerald arrived mid-morning, I could tell from his face that something had shifted. He closed the door behind him before he spoke. "She's been served," he said simply. The words hung in the air like the crack of a gavel. "She, Clara, what did she do?" I asked. "She cried," he said. "Then she raged. Then she hung up on the officer." I didn't flinch. I just nodded. "That sounds like her." He set a sealed envelope on the table. "The official notice. You can read it if you want, but you don't have to." I stared at it for a long time. The government seal staring back. That envelope contained the proof of something I had known in my bones for years. My daughter didn't protect me, she preyed on me. And yet, I couldn't open it. Not yet. "Would you mind holding on to it?" I asked. "Of course," Gerald said softly. "You'll know when you're ready." That afternoon, I joined the art class Marjorie had insisted on. I painted without skill but with strange focus, broad strokes of gold and blue, a sun rising behind water. When I stepped back, the teacher said kindly, "It looks like freedom." I almost laughed. "I wouldn't know what that looks like." "Oh, I think you do," she said, smiling. Maybe I did. Later, in the garden, Gerald found me again. He held 2 cups of tea, sat down beside me, and handed me one. "She called the facility this morning," he said quietly. My heart skipped. "Willow Haven?" He nodded. "She tried to demand a visit. Claimed she needed to assess your mental health. Lydia handled it beautifully, told her visitations by invitation only." I smiled, small but genuine. "I should thank Lydia." "You already did," Gerald said, "by not letting Clara back in." I sipped my tea, the steam curling between us like memory. "She won't stop, will she?" He shook his head. "Control doesn't die easily, but the difference now is she can't reach you." I looked out at the pond again. The koi glided beneath the surface, silent and safe. "Then maybe that's enough." "It's more than enough," Gerald said. "It's peace." That evening, my phone buzzed one last time. Clara. For a moment, my thumb hovered over the screen. I thought of the little girl she'd been, the woman she became, the monster I'd had to face. Then I pressed block. The silence afterward felt sacred. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Peace isn't forgetting the pain, it's no longer needing it explained. Justice isn't loud, it's a door that stays closed when chaos knocks." I closed the book and set it beside my bed. The air smelled of rain again, soft and forgiving. When I turned off the lamp, I didn't think of the past. I thought of the sunrise that would come, and how this time it would rise for me. It was a Thursday when the final confrontation came quiet, unannounced, inevitable. The day began like any other. I joined Marjorie for morning yoga, though we both spent more time laughing than stretching. The light streaming through the glass ceiling made everything glow, and for a brief, beautiful moment, I forgot that darkness still existed outside Willow Haven's walls, until Lydia appeared at the door. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said gently, "there's a woman at the front desk asking for you. She says she's your daughter." My breath caught. "Clara," I said. "Not a question." Lydia nodded, her face apologetic. "Would you like us to bring her in?" "No." My voice was steady. "But I'll watch." From the second-floor balcony that overlooked the lobby, I saw her. Clara stood by the reception desk, arms folded, her red coat too bright against the muted tones of the room. She looked smaller than I remembered, but sharper too, like a blade dulled by anger and fear. Her hair was pulled too tight, her smile brittle. Even from above, I could read the fury in her gestures, the restless tapping of her heel, the way her head snapped each time someone didn't answer quickly enough. The staff handled her calmly, like they'd seen this kind of storm before. "I need to see my mother," she snapped. "You can't just keep her here like some kind of prisoner." Lydia's tone was professional but firm. "Mrs. Whitmore is not a resident under guardianship. She lives here independently. She's asked not to be disturbed." Clara scoffed, a laugh with no humor. "She's confused. That man Gerald, he's manipulating her. You'll see. When this all goes to court, you'll regret standing in the way." She didn't realize how much she'd already revealed with those words. Court. She was terrified, not of losing me, but of losing her power. I watched in silence, unseen behind the tinted glass. This was the woman who'd once braided my hair when I was too weak after surgery. The same hands that now pointed at strangers and accused them of theft had once held mine in the hospital. I waited for the ache, but it didn't come. All I felt was distance. Clean, merciful distance. A soft voice broke my trance. "Are you sure you want to watch this?" It was Gerald. He had arrived without me noticing, standing just behind the glass. "I need to," I said. Below, Clara's voice rose again. "You can't keep me out forever. She's my mother." The receptionist didn't flinch, not without her consent. At that, Clara froze. Her face faltered just for a heartbeat, and I saw it. The moment she realized that control was gone for good. Security stepped forward, not harshly, just firmly. One of them, a tall woman named Doris, spoke quietly to Clara and guided her toward the exit. My daughter resisted for a second, then gave up. Her arms dropped to her sides, the fight bleeding out of her posture. And then she did something unexpected. She looked up right toward where I was standing. She couldn't see me through the tinted glass, but somehow She knew I was there. Her lips parted. She mouthed one word. Mom. A plea, a weapon, a memory. It could have been any of those. But I didn't move. I didn't wave. I didn't forgive. Because forgiveness wasn't owed, it was earned, and she hadn't even started. She left the building a few minutes later, escorted but unshackled. The glass doors closed behind her with a soft hiss, like punctuation on a final sentence. Gerald exhaled beside me. You didn't even flinch. I smiled faintly. That's because I already said goodbye. We stood there for a moment, watching the sunlight catch the koi pond below. She'll try again, he said eventually. I know, I replied. But I won't. He turned toward me, brow furrowed. Won't what? Won't try to make her love me back. Some battles aren't lost. They're just retired. Gerald nodded slowly, understanding. That's not weakness, Eleanor. That's wisdom. That evening, I sat in the garden again with Marjorie and Beatrice. The breeze smelled of mint and wet earth. Marjorie handed me a small paper fan. You looked powerful today, she said. I didn't do anything. Exactly, she grinned. Sometimes restraint is the loudest thing in the room. I chuckled, watching the koi glide lazily beneath the pond's surface. It was strange, the peace that comes when the storm finally runs out of thunder. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't bitter. I was just done. Before bed, I wrote in my journal. She came to win. I stayed to heal. One of us left empty-handed. Then I underlined a single sentence. I didn't need to raise my voice to be heard. When I closed the notebook, I realized the sound that filled the room wasn't silence anymore. It was breathing steady, unafraid, alive. 2 days passed after Clara's visit, and the air around Willow Haven seemed to lighten as though the place itself had exhaled with me. The tension that had followed me like a ghost finally loosened its grip. I woke early that morning, made tea, and opened the window. Outside, mist hung low over the pond, soft as memory. The world smelled of wet grass and freedom. For once, I didn't feel the need to rush anywhere, to defend myself, or to brace for disappointment. Still, a tiny unease whispered somewhere inside me, not fear, but awareness. A woman who survived betrayal learns never to confuse calm with safety. That awareness proved right when Gerald arrived just before noon, looking more serious than usual. He took off his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose before speaking. You might want to sit down for this. I did. What happened? She sent a letter. My heart didn't stop, but it stumbled. To me? He nodded and placed an ivory envelope on the table. It was thick, handwritten in her precise, slanted cursive. Clara Whitmore. I stared at it, the air between us heavy with everything unsaid. Did you read it? No, he said gently. That's your choice. I turned the envelope in my hands. The paper smelled faintly of her perfume, gardenia, and guilt. For a moment, I was back in her kitchen, the morning light, the coffee, the sting. Would you like me to stay? Gerald asked. No, I said. This one I'll face alone. After he left, I made another cup of tea and sat by the window. My hands trembled slightly as I tore the envelope open. The first word hit me like a small stone. Mom. Not dear Mom. Not mother. Just that single, unadorned claim. I read the rest slowly, each line a tangle of contradiction. I know things got out of hand. I never meant for you to feel pushed aside. We're having a hard time now, bills piling up. Ethan didn't qualify for his car loan. Maybe we can talk. I stopped there. I didn't need to read more. The rest would only twist the knife in familiar ways. The apology with a hook, the regret wrapped around a request. Then I saw it, a check enclosed, drawn from one of the old joint accounts she'd opened. For convenience, my signature was on it, except I hadn't written it. The amount, $3,500. The memo line, car repairs. My breath steadied. There it was, the final proof. The same pattern, dressed up as sentiment. She hadn't written to reconcile. She'd written to reopen the door she could no longer break down. I folded the check once, then again, until it was small enough to disappear in my palm. Then I walked to the shredder near the front office, slid the folded paper in, and watched it vanish into strips of useless white. Not anger, not revenge, just removal. When I returned to my room, Marjorie was waiting at the doorway, a slice of lemon cake in hand. You look like you've seen something nasty, she said, peering over her glasses. Just a ghost, I replied, and I buried it. She grinned, handing me the plate. Good. I've always said ghosts only stay when you keep feeding them. That evening, Gerald stopped by again, carrying his usual briefcase and a faint smile. She tried to cash that check, he said before I could even speak. He blinked. Already? She must have made a copy before mailing it. The bank flagged it. It's been added to her file. I sat down slowly, the weight of it sinking in. So it's really over. He tilted his head. Not quite, but close. The investigation's nearly wrapped up. They've gathered enough to proceed with charges if she doesn't back off. I nodded. And if she does, then you move on. He gave me a look, not pity, but respect. You've already won the part that matters, Eleanor. You stopped being afraid. That night, I wrote just one line in my journal. She keeps sending letters. I keep sending silence. It's the only language that no longer gets lost in translation. I placed the journal beside my bed, turned off the lamp, and let the quiet stretch around me. It didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. Outside, the koi glided under the moonlight, gentle, untouchable, free. The next few mornings came softly, like grace on quiet feet. I had stopped counting days. Time here flowed differently, slow, deliberate, healing. Breakfast in the sunroom had become my ritual. A cup of black tea, a slice of buttered toast, and the newspaper folded neatly in half. Marjorie joined me most mornings, and Beatrice would usually shuffle in late, pretending she'd overslept, though everyone knew she just liked a dramatic entrance. That day, however, felt stiller than usual. Even the koi seemed to move slower beneath the pond's glassy surface. When Gerald arrived, I could tell the storm had finally broken, only this time, the thunder was justice. He sat down opposite me, eyes bright but voice measured. Eleanor, you might want to sit tight. I just came from the protection unit. My stomach tightened. It's over, isn't it? He nodded. The investigation's concluded. They found evidence of multiple forged transactions, digital, handwritten, even phone recordings where she impersonated you. The case has been escalated for prosecution. For a moment, the air left my lungs. So, she'll likely face charges for financial exploitation and forgery, he said gently. It's in the hands of the state now. They'll contact you for a statement, but you don't have to see her. You've done your part. I set my teacup down carefully. I didn't think it would come to this. Gerald leaned forward, voice steady. You didn't cause this, Eleanor. You revealed it. There's a difference. The words settled somewhere deep inside me, warm, painful, freeing. That afternoon, I sat by the pond alone. The sunlight flickered on the water like scattered gold. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like witness. Everything Clara had done, the lies, the manipulation, the theft, it all existed now in official files, stamped and recorded. Not because I screamed loud enough, but because I refused to stay quiet anymore. And yet, grief came anyway. Not for what she'd taken, but for what she'd destroyed, the invisible thread between mother and daughter that had once felt unbreakable. Marjorie found me there, as she always did when silence grew too heavy. You look like someone who just lost a war. She didn't want to fight, she said gently. I smiled faintly. I didn't lose. I know, she said, but winning can still hurt. That evening, Gerald came by again, holding a small package wrapped in brown paper. This arrived for you at the trust office, he said. I frowned. From whom? He shrugged. No return address. Inside the paper was a small velvet box. My breath caught when I opened it. Inside was the pearl ring. Cliff's ring, the one I thought I'd lost years ago. There was a note underneath, written in neat, careful handwriting. I found this in your old dresser. I didn't mean to keep it. Maybe I did. I don't know anymore. I'm sorry. See. I stared at the ring for a long time. It glimmered softly in the lamplight, unassuming, almost fragile. Will you keep it? Gerald asked quietly. Yes, I said finally. But not for her. For me. To remember that love can be real, even if the person who gave it forgot how to honor it. He nodded. That's fair. That night, I placed the ring on the nightstand beside my journal. I didn't write this time. Some truths don't need ink, they just need breath. As I turned out the light, I realized that forgiveness, if it ever came, wouldn't arrive in a letter or a courtroom. It would come in moments like this when the world was quiet, when the damage had stopped spreading, when I could breathe without explaining. The next morning, I would meet with the officers for a final statement. I wasn't nervous. The fear was gone, replaced by something steady and unyielding. I had learned what most people never do. Peace isn't given, it's reclaimed. Before bed, I whispered one last thing into the stillness. You tried to own me, Clara, but I kept the receipts. And then, for the first time in years, I slept through the night, no dreams, no ghosts, no guilt, just rest. When I awoke the next morning, sunlight spilled through my curtains in wide, golden ribbons, the kind of light that doesn't just touch a room, it blesses it. I stretched, let out a soft groan, and realized something extraordinary. I wasn't waking up worried. No dread, no second guessing, no fear of another demand, another guilt-laced favor. Just peace. I brewed tea, set it by the window, and opened the journal one last time. The ink stains told their own story, from shaky lines written in tears to steady strokes of calm certainty. Every page, every confession had built a bridge from who I was to who I had become. Today, I was crossing it. Gerald picked me up at 10 sharp for my final statement at the Financial Protection Office. The car ride was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels complete. I watched the town pass by streets lined with red maples, bakery windows filled with cinnamon rolls, a group of schoolchildren laughing as they ran through puddles. Life had gone on, and now, finally, so had I. At the office, a young investigator named Officer Cruz greeted me kindly. She couldn't have been more than 30, but her eyes held the gravity of someone who'd seen too many versions of my story. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "We just need your final confirmation for the record. Everything's already been reviewed." I nodded, taking the seat across from her. "Ask whatever you need." For the next 20 minutes, we went over the details. My signature confirmed each document, each timeline, each transfer. When it was done, she smiled, tired, genuine. "You'd be surprised how many people never make it this far," she said. "Most give up before the paperwork's done. You didn't." "I didn't have the luxury of giving up," I replied. "People like her count on your silence." Officer Cruz nodded. "Not anymore." She closed the folder, sealing the final chapter with a satisfying click. "You're officially protected, Mrs. Whitmore. Your accounts, property, and identity are secure." The words filled the air like a benediction. Protected, secure, mine. When I stepped outside, Gerald was waiting by the car, hands in his pockets, smiling softly. "All done?" "All done," I said. We drove back to Willow Haven in silence, not because there was nothing to say, but because nothing needed saying. For the first time, quiet didn't feel like a void. It felt like home. As we turned into the familiar driveway, I saw the koi pond shimmer in the sunday. A pair of ducks had landed, their feathers glinting gold. Gerald parked and turned toward me. "You did it," he said simply. I smiled, a slow, content smile. "No, we did. You gave me back my voice." He shook his head. "You always had it. You just finally raised the volume." That afternoon, Marjorie found me sitting by the pond with my shoes off, my feet dipped into the cool water. "Well, don't you look like a woman reborn?" she teased, setting down 2 glasses of lemonade. "I am," I said, "officially and legally." She laughed. "Now that's the kind of rebirth I can toast to." We sat together watching the fish drift lazily beneath the surface. Their movement was hypnotic, slow, graceful, unbothered. "You ever think about what comes next?" she asked. "Not the way I used to," I said. "I used to think next meant waiting for something better. Now it just means being here long enough to enjoy what already is." Marjorie nodded, eyes soft. "That's wisdom, the kind that costs everything but buys peace." That evening, I went to my room and pulled open the drawer with Cliff's pearl ring. It caught the last light of the day, glowing faintly. I slipped it onto my finger. It fit perfectly. I walked to the mirror, expecting to see the same tired face I'd seen for years, lined, weary, resigned. But the woman staring back looked different. The lines were still there, but they'd settled into strength, not sorrow. She wasn't small. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't surviving anymore. She was living. Before bed, I wrote my final journal entry. The law protected my name, but I protected my soul. For years, I thought peace was something others granted you. It's not. It's what's left when you stop handing out pieces of yourself to those who only take. Then I added, underlined twice, some debts are paid in silence. Others are paid in self-respect. I closed the journal, slipped it into the drawer, and turned off the lamp. As I lay back, I thought about the sound of the koi pond outside, the steady rhythm of water against stone. For once, the quiet didn't echo. It rested. And so did I. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, warm, slow, quiet. The kind of day when even time seems to recline and stretch its limbs. I had just finished helping Marjorie arrange flowers for the dining hall when Lydia appeared, holding her ever-present clipboard. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said softly, "there's something you should know. Your daughter called again. This time she didn't ask to speak with you. She asked to confirm whether you'd be available for a legal mediation." He blinked. "A mediation?" "Yes," Lydia nodded. "Apparently her lawyer suggested it, but she didn't leave any details. I told her we'd forward the message to your counsel." I exhaled slowly, set the vase down. "Thank you, Lydia." As she left, Marjorie arched an eyebrow. "She just doesn't give up, does she?" "No," I said, smoothing the petals of a lily. "But that's the nature of those who build their worth on control. They think the locks will always turn in their favor." Later that evening, Gerald came by. He looked calm, almost amused, holding a thin envelope in one hand. "She's folding," he said simply. "Clara's lawyer reached out. She's requesting mediation to avoid public charges. They're offering a written apology and restitution." I smiled faintly. "Restitution?" He nodded. "Full repayment of the stolen funds, plus damages. It's a standard negotiation, but—" He paused, leaning forward. "You don't have to accept. The DA already has enough to proceed." I was quiet for a long moment. The clock ticked softly in the background, counting my hesitation. "I don't want her in prison," I said finally. "Not because she doesn't deserve it, but because I deserve peace." Gerald nodded. "Then we'll arrange for written settlement and formal apology. Once it's filed, she can't contact you again. And if she tries?" He smiled gently. "Then the law will handle what you no longer need to." That night, I walked to the garden. The air smelled of summer rain, sweet and heavy. The koi stirred beneath the surface, gliding like living jewels. I sat on the stone bench, folded my hands in my lap, and closed my eyes. I thought about Clara, not the criminal or the manipulator, but the girl she used to be. The one who'd run through sprinklers barefoot, who used to cry over lightning, who'd once said she wanted to be a doctor like me. Where had that child gone? Maybe she had disappeared the same way I had once disappeared, swallowed by the need to be loved, to be powerful, to be seen. Maybe, in some twisted way, we were both learning how to be free. The difference was, I had survived the lesson. The next morning, Gerald came by with the papers. "She signed it," he said. "It's over, Eleanor. Officially." He handed me the document, a formal statement acknowledging her wrongdoing, forfeiting access to my finances, and agreeing to repay restitution in full. At the bottom, her signature shaky, smudged, still familiar. "Do you want me to file it?" Gerald asked. "Yes," I said softly. "I don't need to keep it. I just needed to know it existed." He nodded, understanding the unspoken truth. Forgiveness wasn't the absence of justice, it was the absence of obsession. That afternoon, Marjorie and I walked down to the small cafe by the lake outside Willow Haven. The summer air was warm, thick with the smell of coffee and bread. "To freedom," she said, lifting her glass of iced lemonade. I raised mine. "And to boundaries." We clinked, laughing. "You ever think she'll change?" Marjorie asked. I smiled faintly. "Maybe, but she'll have to do it from outside my life." We sat there a while, watching ducks glide across the water. The world had moved on, but in the simplest, most miraculous way, so had I. When I returned to my room that evening, I found a small envelope slipped under the door, no return name, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. Inside was a single photograph. Clara as a child, missing 2 front teeth, holding a seashell up to her ear on a beach. No note, no apology, just that image, frozen in innocence. I stared at it for a long moment before placing it inside my journal. Not as an invitation to reopen the wound, but as a reminder of how it once felt before the hurt began. We were both different now, both unrecognizable, but I was still here, still whole, still me. Before bed, I whispered into the darkness. Love and loss are twins. I've just learned which one to raise. Then I smiled, pulled the covers close, and drifted into sleep beneath the hum of the summer crickets, soft, forgiving, eternal. The seasons turned quietly at Willow Haven. Summer softened into that first crisp breath of autumn mornings, cool enough for sweaters, evenings full of crickets and cinnamon-scented air. I had started volunteering in the library, shelving donated paperbacks and chatting with residents who came in for puzzles or conversation. The days no longer revolved around loss. They revolved around living. Sometimes, I caught myself smiling at simple things. The sound of pages turning, the distant laughter from the courtyard, the soft thud of koi tails against the pond's surface. Life had become measured again, but not small. It had become mine. One afternoon, Gerald arrived holding 2 cups of coffee and a folder, his version of flowers. "You've officially closed the restitution account," he said, grinning. "Funds repaid. Case dismissed. All parties satisfied." "All parties?" I teased. "That's generous wording." He chuckled. "Fine. One party satisfied. One still learning what consequences mean." I accepted the coffee and took a long, content sip. "Thank you, Gerald. For everything." He shook his head. "You did the hard part, Eleanor. I just handled the paperwork." "No," I said softly. "You taught me how to speak without shouting." That evening, I stood by the koi pond as the sun dipped low, setting the water ablaze with color. The air shimmered with that golden quiet that only comes when the day is almost over but not yet gone. I thought about Clara again, less as a wound now, more as a warning folded into memory. I didn't hate her. I didn't forgive her. I simply released her. In the distance, I saw Marjorie waving from the terrace, holding up a glass of wine. Beatrice shouted something about bridge night starting soon. Their laughter floated through the air like wind chimes. I smiled and waved back. Then, I turned toward the water and whispered, "I made it." The koi stirred beneath the surface, their movement scattering the reflection of the sky until the light fractured into hundreds of small, trembling stars. For a moment, I saw myself in those ripples, fragmented, imperfect, still beautiful. Later, in my room, I opened my journal for the final time. The pages smelled faintly of lavender and old ink. I began to write, not out of habit, but ceremony. I am not the woman who begged for love. I am not the mother who traded silence for belonging. I am not the patient waiting for rescue. I am the witness of my own endurance. I am the keeper of my own peace. And I am free. I closed the journal, tied its ribbon, and placed it inside the drawer next to Cliff's ring. Together, they felt like closure, one representing a past I cherished, the other a future I finally owned. I turned off the lamp, letting the silver light of the moon spill across the floor. Somewhere beyond the window, the koi moved, eternal and unhurried. And in that stillness, I realized the truth that every survivor eventually learns. The quiet isn't what remains after the noise fades. The quiet is what you were searching for all along.